I remember walking through the fog that night, the air heavy with the metallic scent of old iron and damp earth. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches brushing together as if whispering secrets only they could hear. Somewhere beneath the mist, the ground shifted, soft with the weight of history. Footsteps that weren't mine, fading and returning, distant yet unnervingly close. My lantern flickered, spilling pale light across jagged gravestones half swallowed by moss. The wind carried a faint hum, almost like a lullaby, but with a strange rhythm that made my chest tighten. Somewhere in the hollow of the valley, a soft metallic clang echoed, steel on steel, then silence. I thought I imagined it. I thought I was alone. But then the fog parted for a fraction of a second, and I saw the shape of a soldier, uniform tattered, face obscured by shadow, standing completely still. That's when I realized I wasn't the only one wandering this battlefield tonight. The fog lay thick across the trenches. Each step sank into the wet earth, muffled, hesitant. I could feel the cold seeping through my boots, rising to my knees. The silence was never complete. A faint whisper slid along the mud, curling around my ankles. It was distant, yet insistent, like someone breathing just behind my ear. Shadows shifted along the trench walls. They weren't mine. They weren't human. Rusted helmets leaned against the mud like tired soldiers. I thought they were empty, but sometimes I could swear. They were watching. A flash of light broke the gray. Skeletal hands gripped rifles, clawing at the air. The bones were pale against the wet earth, gleaming in the weak sun. The whispers grew sharper, fragmenting into words I could almost understand. Promises, threats, names I did not know. The wind carried them, wrapping them around my chest. I walked slowly. Each footstep left a soft imprint in the mud. The earth seemed to breathe beneath me, rising and falling in rhythm with my own pulse. Then a drum, distant, hollow, uneven. It came and went, blending with the wind as if the earth itself were summoning something. My hands were numb. I reached for the nearest helmet, but it was cold and empty. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered, crawling across my skin like frost. Fog thickened around me. I could barely see the trench ahead. Shadows lengthened, melting into the walls, then twisting back into shapes I couldn't name. I tried to listen, to understand the whispers, but they shifted with each breath, slipping through my fingers like smoke. A low hum rose beneath the wind. Not mechanical, not human, something else. A flash again. Bones, rifles, hands that shouldn't have been alive. They moved in slow arcs, not attacking, not retreating, just observing. The drums returned. They followed the rhythm of my heartbeat. Faster, slower. A cruel mimicry of my own fear. I paused. The trench ahead was empty, or so it seemed. But the whispers pressed closer, brushing against my mind, tugging at memories I could not place. A helmet toppled. I flinched. It clattered into the mud and rolled toward me as if it had been thrown. I did not see who or what sent it, and the fog did not answer. I kept walking, each step heavier than the last. The whispers became fragments of conversations, of lives long ended, of warnings I could not decipher. Something shifted behind the trench wall. Soft footsteps, no sound. The air tasted of rust and decay. The fog wrapped around me like a shroud. The skeletal hands were gone, vanished into the mist, but the fear remained, thick and sticky. The drums faded, leaving only silence. I could still feel eyes on me. Still hear whispers crawling across the soil, winding through the fog. I did not turn back. I could not. Only the trench, and the memory of hands reaching from the earth, and the quiet certainty that something waits beneath the mud, watching. The battlefield stretched forever beneath a pale, shaking moon. Fog clung to the mud like a second skin. Each breath tasted of cold earth and wet grass. I walked slowly, boots sinking into the soft ground. Something brushed against my arm, a chill, fleeting. I told myself it was nothing. Then I noticed the footprints beside mine. Fresh impressions pressed into the mud. But I was alone. With every step I took, another followed. Soft, careful, mirroring my movements exactly. The rhythm of two hearts in one, though I felt only my own. The moon trembled above, casting pale light that barely touched the fog. Shadows slid between the mist and the earth. They moved too smoothly, too deliberate. I slowed. The footprints did too. We were walking together, but apart. A rustling came from the bushes to my left. Dry leaves skittered across the soil. I froze. The sound stopped as suddenly as it began. The footsteps did too. Silence pressed in, heavier than the fog, denser than the mud beneath my boots. I could feel the presence behind me without turning. A weight in the air close enough to taste. Something that didn't breathe, but watched. I forced myself to move again. Step, pause, step, pause. Each movement echoed in the quiet, swallowed and returned by the fog. The footprints remained, always beside mine. No one there. My hands trembled. The damp air made them cold. I ran them over my face. Nothing. The battlefield shifted under the pale light. Hollows in the mud became deeper, shadows longer. I could hear the faintest scraping. Or was it my imagination? The fog thickened, pressing against my chest. I could barely see my own hands. The footprints pressed closer, closer. But no form appeared. The rustling returned, faint, almost hesitant. The bushes quivered, though no wind moved them. My heartbeat rose uneven. I wanted to call out, but no sound left my throat. Only the silent echo of being mirrored. The moon flickered, a pale light that made the fog shimmer like wet silk. And in that shimmer, the footprints glimmered too. Not just beside mine, but behind, tracing every line, every step. I stumbled. The earth sucked at my boots. The presence did not falter. I stopped completely, and the footprints stopped. The silence pressed into me, sharper than any shadow, heavier than the mud. I could smell wet grass, decay, and the iron tang of old blood. I could feel eyes where none should be. Alone, yet not alone. I turned my head slightly. Nothing moved, but everything waited. Step, pause, step, pause. I moved forward, small and careful. The footprints did not move. I could no longer tell where I ended, and the mirroring began. The fog consumed everything, folding the world in layers of gray. The battlefield stretched endlessly, and I was utterly, impossibly alone. The fog clung to the battlefield like damp wool. The moon hung low, pale, shaking through thin clouds. Each breath carried the scent of wet earth and iron. I stumbled over something soft, soaked, forgotten. A satchel. Leather cracked, straps frayed, damp from rain. I opened it slowly. Inside, letters pressed together, curling at the edges. The paper smelled of mold and loss. I touched the first envelope. The ink had run into the fibers, smudging words I could almost read. Names I knew, or thought I did, stared back at me. I unfolded a letter. The words shifted beneath my eyes. Pleas for safety became warnings. Do not go became do not return. The wind moved through the trees, low and constant. It shaped the whispers around me, turning rustling leaves into voices. Soft, distant, yet certain. I could feel the battlefield leaning closer, pressing its damp weight against my shoulders. Footsteps pressed into the mud. But when I looked, the earth was empty. Another letter. Same handwriting, same trembling ink. Each word trembled on the page, shifting from hope to fear. I pressed my hand to my chest. A hum rose in the wind. It was neither music nor machine. It threaded through the fog, wrapping around my ears. The whispers grew, bending the edges of reality. I tried to focus on the paper, but the letters seemed to writhe. Forgive me, changed to, you should have left. I felt a pang in my stomach, cold and hollow. The satchel quivered. A dry rustle of paper. I jumped, though I was alone. The fog swallowed the movement, leaving only the weight of silence. The trees leaned nearer, black fingers brushing the edges of my vision. The wind pressed its voice against my face, shaping the whispers into something I almost recognized. The voices were pleading. They were accusing. I dropped the letter. The pages fluttered like trapped wings. Mud clung to them, cold and sticky. I felt their wetness seep into my fingertips. A shadow moved across the ground. I tried to follow it. It melted into the fog, leaving only the sound of something heavy dragging along the wet soil. I bent down to pick another letter. The words shifted again. Come back became, you cannot. My chest tightened. I swallowed the lump of fear in my throat. The wind hummed higher. It carried the echo of voices I could not name. Names I should have remembered. I could feel regret in the air, thick and unyielding. It pressed against my temples, heavy as the fog, bitter as the mud. I wanted to leave, but something held me. Something small, fragile, desperate. The satchel lay open at my feet. The letters whispered between themselves, moving in the wind. I knelt, tracing the lines that had shifted before me, hoping to find the truth hidden in the trembling ink. The battlefield stretched endless. Fog curling in on itself, shadows folded over shadows. The satchel seemed to pulse in my hands, soft and alive. Regret seeped into my bones. I left the letters where they had fallen. The whispers followed me a few steps, then lingered, holding me in place. The wind carried the echo of promises I could never keep. I walked on, alone, yet burdened by voices that had never been mine. The fog swallowed the battlefield, the satchel, the voices, and I carried the weight of what I could not save. The fog lay thick over the battlefield, curling around every tree and mound of earth. The moon hung pale and trembling. Each breath smelled of damp soil and rusted metal. Ahead, a light swung gently. A lantern? No hand held it. I paused. The fog softened its edges, but the light pulsed, steady, almost alive. A quiet clink echoed behind it, like soft boots pressing into mud. I followed. Curiosity tugged at my chest. The air felt colder with each step, tasting faintly of smoke and iron. The lantern moved smoothly, sliding over roots and mud, never faltering. Shadows stretched along its glow, bending unnaturally toward it. I could feel the earth breathing beneath my boots, slow and wet. The light paused. A soldier stood within its glow, still as stone. His eyes were empty, staring past me, through me. The lantern's glow painted pale lines across his face, catching every hollow. I blinked, and the lantern was gone. The soldier, too, vanished into the mist, but the echoes remained. The soft clink of boots lingering in the fog. A low hum rose where the light had been. It moved with the rhythm of my own pulse. I reached out, but nothing touched my fingers. Only the damp air pressed against my skin, scented with cold earth and old smoke. The fog curled tighter around me, swallowing shapes and distance. I moved forward. The clink followed, closer, then farther, like a heartbeat echoing from another time. Trees leaned toward me. Their branches scraped against the fog, leaving rustling whispers in their wake. The world felt thinner, stretched over something just out of reach. I turned a corner. The lantern appeared again. It hovered, swinging gently, suspended by nothing. The glow carved paths in the mist. I stepped closer. The soldier emerged from the light. Blank eyes, pale face, boots pressed into the wet ground. He did not move, did not breathe. Yet I felt the weight of him, pressing against my ribs. The lantern tilted as if beckoning. I could hear the faintest clink of metal, and then silence. I blinked. The soldier and the lantern were gone. Only the fog remained, thick and unyielding, but the echoes lingered. Boots on mud, a hum in the air. Something watching from just beyond sight. I stumbled, heart hammering. The earth clung to my boots, cold and sticky. I felt the fog curl into my hair, brushing my cheeks, whispering against my neck. The lantern light returned for an instant. A pale hand swung it gently. The soldier's eyes met mine, empty, hollow, endless, and then gone again. I stood, alone. The fog moved like water around me. The echoes faded slowly, leaving only the wet scent of earth and smoke. I wanted to run, but wonder held me still. The kind of wonder that prickles at your skin, makes your chest ache, and leaves your mind trembling. The battlefield stretched endless. The lantern's glow disappeared, yet I could feel its rhythm in my chest. The clink of boots, soft and certain, faded with the mist. I took a step. The fog pressed back. The earth hummed beneath my feet. The world seemed larger, older, and impossibly empty all at once. And still, somewhere ahead, I felt it waiting. The lantern, the soldier, the echoes. A quiet fear wrapped around a trembling curiosity. I kept moving, slow, careful. The fog swallowing each step, the echoes carrying me forward. Wonder and fear intertwined in my chest, lingering like the smell of smoke in damp air. The hills rose and fell like jagged waves beneath a pale, trembling sky. Fog clung to every slope, softening edges, swallowing distance. The air tasted of iron and cold earth. Rusted helmets peeked through the mist. Swords, half buried, leaned against the mud. Cannons jutted from the soil like broken teeth. I stepped carefully, boots sinking into damp earth. Each step pressed a chill into my bones. The fog moved with me, folding and curling around my legs, a scrape. Metal against stone. Dull, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. I froze. The sound came again, nearer now, then shifted sideways from a ridge I had just passed. I felt it watching, moving, alive. The rusted helmets seemed to tilt slightly in the fog. Shadows pooled beneath the half-buried swords. I pressed my hand against a cannon. Cold, rough, solid. Yet something vibrated beneath it. I followed the rhythm. Each metallic scrape echoed through the hills. But every time I reached the source, it had moved again. A heartbeat of iron, playing hide-and-seek with me. The fog thickened, smelling of wet rust and decay. The hills breathed beneath my feet. I could feel a subtle vibration, soft and constant, like the land itself pulsing. A helmet tumbled over the mud. It rolled and stopped at my feet. I shivered, brushing dirt from my fingers. The fog swallowed the motion as if it had never happened. I walked along a ridge. The scrape shifted again. Close now, almost beside me, yet nowhere I could see. I imagined a hand scraping metal just out of reach, a creature of forgotten war. The hills undulated beneath the fog. Shadows moved independently of the light. The earth hummed under my boots, carrying a scent of rust and old smoke. I knelt to touch the mud. Cold, sticky. Embedded in it, a sword hilt. I traced the edge with a trembling finger. The scrape repeated behind me, closer, softer. A cannon barrel gleamed faintly. I pressed my face to it, seeing the fog reflected on its surface. Something moved in the reflection. I blinked. Nothing. The fog whispered around me. Soft breaths of air tugged at my sleeves. I felt the hills leaning closer, rolling like waves ready to crash. The scrape shifted again, and again. I stood and stepped forward, careful. Each hill rose beneath me like a living thing. The metallic heartbeat followed, echoing across slopes, hiding in hollows. I reached for another helmet. Cold, rough. The fog curled around it, folding the world into itself. I could hear my own breath, shallow, trembling. The scrape pulsed, sinking with it briefly. Then diverging, a rhythm all its own. A sword jutted from the mud at an odd angle. I touched it lightly. It resonated under my fingertips, soft, vibrating through the earth. The fog pressed closer, smelling of iron and wet decay. The hills rose endlessly ahead. Rusted relics punctuated their slopes, glinting in the pale, trembling light. I could feel the battlefield shifting beneath me, alive, watching, waiting. I took a careful step. The scrape echoed behind me. I turned. Nothing. Yet I felt it near, skimming the fog, brushing the edges of my awareness. The fog moved like water. The hills rolled silently. I sensed motion in every shadow, every half-buried helmet, every rusted sword. The battlefield pulsed quietly, a heartbeat of iron and earth. I walked on. Curiosity pressed me forward even as unease pooled in my chest. The fog thickened, swallowing distance, swallowing sound. The scrape followed, always just beyond sight. The hills rolled endlessly beneath the pale light. The fog clung damp and cold, curling around me. I could feel the pulse of metal under the earth, alive, watching. I did not know what lay ahead, only that I wanted to find out. The battlefield waited, patient, breathing beneath the fog, its heartbeat echoing softly in my chest. The fog stretched across the battlefield like a gray blanket. Moonlight trembled through it, pale and fractured. The earth smelled damp, cold, and faintly of rust. A sound rose from the distance, soft at first, then steady. A drum, not a beat for celebration, but a slow, muffled rhythm. A march that pressed into my chest, resonating in my bones. I froze. The fog shifted, curling around the hollows and ridges of the ground. Shadows moved along the earth, rising and falling with the drumbeat. No soldiers were visible. Yet the rhythm carried them, shaping them out of darkness. Boots pressed into mud I could not see. The wind whispered through the trees. Commands, faint, indistinct. Words curling around my ears, brushing my skin like breath. The shadows marched closer, steady, in sync with the drum. They bent and twisted as if guided by some unseen hand. I stepped forward. The fog clung to my legs, damp and heavy. Each movement echoed the cadence, even my own heartbeat sinking without choice. The drum's sound shifted, sliding across the battlefield. A hollow echo behind a hill, then again closer. The shadows followed, slipping silently along the earth, twisting with the rhythm. I touched the mud, cold, wet, sticky. The vibration of the drum hummed through it, brushing against my fingers. The whispers grew clearer. Faint commands repeated softly. Forward. Halt, kneel. They carried a weight I could not see, a discipline from some time long past. The fog swirled around me. I could see the pale moonlight glinting off wet leaves and metal. Shadows bent, dissolved, and reformed, tracing the drum's unseen pattern. A pause. The cadence stopped abruptly. The silence that followed pressed into me thick and heavy. It vibrated in my chest, leaving only the echo of absence. I blinked. The shadows did not vanish. They lingered, still, like dark glass pressed into the earth. The whispers faded, leaving the rustle of wet leaves. I could smell damp soil, iron, and the faint tang of old smoke. My hands trembled, brushing against the fog as if it could steady me. The drum resumed briefly, softer this time. A heartbeat echoing through the fog. Then again silence. I felt the gaps in sound, the missing rhythm, more than I heard it. I moved forward slowly, boots sinking into mud that seemed to pulse beneath me. The shadows stretched, rising over mounds and hollows, folding the earth into their rhythm. I caught glimpses of shapes in the mist, figures bending with the drum beat, pale light flickering on imagined helmets and rifles. I reached out. Nothing. The wind carried the whispers again, teasing the edge of understanding. Commands without origin, voices without bodies. I could feel them pressing against my mind, wrapping around my thoughts, guiding my pulse. I stopped. The drum had gone completely silent. And the shadows, they lingered. Motionless, patient, watching through the fog. The silence vibrated in my chest, heavy and unyielding. Every breath I drew felt mirrored by some unseen presence. The wind hummed softly, carrying remnants of rhythm and voice. I could feel dread crawling along my spine. A weight in the fog, pressing, patient, relentless. The battlefield seemed to stretch endlessly, folding shadows over shadows. I took a step. The fog shifted, brushing against my cheeks. A shadow bent slightly as if acknowledging me. Then nothing moved. The drumbeat returned only in memory. Soft, haunting, impossible to locate, and then faded completely, leaving only the weight of the unseen. I walked on, alone, though the battlefield seemed full. The fog clung to me, damp and whispering, and the echoes of the march pressed close, just beyond sight. The night stretched endless. I could feel the rhythm in the earth, in the fog, in my own chest. A steady, invisible drum beating beneath the world. Dread settled in my bones. And still I could not look away. The march continued somewhere, waiting, patient, beneath the fog, beneath the moon, beneath everything I thought I knew. Moonlight barely touched the forest. The trees loomed like dark sentinels, trunks slick with damp bark. The air smelled of wet leaves and cold earth, heavy and still. Fog curled between the roots. Soft and slow, it drifted along the mossy ground. Every step I took sank slightly into the damp soil. Shadows flickered between trunks. Too fast to be human. They melted into the mist before I could focus. I slowed. A rustle of leaves, though the wind did not move. A faint brush against my arm, cold and fleeting. I blinked. A figure froze just beyond reach. Tall, pale in the moonlight, still as stone. I wanted to move closer. Curiosity tugged at my chest, warm and sharp. The forest held its breath, watching, patient. The fog thickened around me. I could feel moisture curling into my hair, pressing against my skin. The earth beneath my boots seemed to hum softly. I stepped forward. The figure did not move. Its presence pressed into me, solid and yet impossible. Leaves whispered under unseen weight. I could smell the damp moss and faint smoke from somewhere distant. The shadows flickered again, darting between trunks, teasing the edges of my vision. The figure remained frozen. Its eyes, pale and unreadable, met mine for a moment I could not measure. Then the shadows surged, flowing past, leaving only the outline of trees. I held my breath. The forest felt alive. Every trunk and branch seemed to lean closer, bending the fog around them. A soft, almost imperceptible hum rose in the silence. I felt it in my chest, echoing the rhythm of my heartbeat. The leaves rustled again, curling against my arms and legs, though still no wind stirred. I blinked. The frozen figure shifted slightly, just a fraction. The moonlight caught its outline, pale against the dark. It did not move closer. It did not vanish. I took another step. The figure remained unwavering. Shadows continued to flicker between trees, faster than thought. A branch pressed against my shoulder, cold, damp, sticky with moss. The forest whispered, pressed, and waited. I could feel my pulse in my ears, every sense stretched, tasting the damp, smelling the earth, hearing the rustle, seeing shapes that should not exist. The figure's outline shimmered, not quite solid, not quite shadow. I wanted to reach out, but my arm felt heavy, slow, distant from my mind. The fog shifted around me, curling between my fingers, brushing my face. The forest leaned closer still, quiet and patient. The shadows flickered and vanished, leaving the frozen figure alone. I blinked again. It remained just beyond reach, impossible and still. A presence both terrifying and beautiful, impossible and certain. Leaves stirred without wind. A hum hummed low beneath my feet, beneath the fog, beneath the trees. I felt my chest tighten. I stepped back. The figure did not move. The forest seemed to breathe, inhale, and exhale around me, slow and heavy. I wanted to turn. I wanted to run. But fear held me still, mingled with something sharper. Wonder, impossible and aching. The shadows between trees flickered once more. Too fast, too fleeting. The figure remained frozen just beyond reach, and the forest waited. The fog clung to my boots as I finally moved. Every step pressed the damp earth, soft and unyielding. The forest whispered around me, shadows folding, bending, watching. I left the frozen figure behind. Yet I could feel its presence lingering, pale and impossible, fearful and wondrous, like a heartbeat pressed into the fog. The fog lay thick across the battlefield, curling over mud and hollow trenches. The pale light of the moon trembled through the mist. Each breath smelled of damp earth and smoke, heavy in my lungs. I stumbled over something dark, pressed into the mud. A rifle. Its barrel pointed into the fog, empty but warm against my palms. I lifted it slowly. The metal hummed faintly, pressing heat into my fingers. The fog thickened around me, swallowing shapes, folding shadows into itself. Distant gunfire echoed, or maybe memory carried on the wind. Every sound sharpened. Boots crunching, soft footsteps in the mud, distant shouting, silence stretching between each. The rifle felt heavier than it should, cold metal vibrating against bone. I could feel the rhythm of past chaos pressing through it. I moved forward. The fog shifted, coiling over my boots. The echoes followed me. Every stomp of my foot matched the beat of distant invisible soldiers. The rifle trembled faintly in my hands. The fog pressed closer. Shapes blurred in the pale light. Mud clung to my boots, thick and wet. I stopped. The distant gunfire stopped. Silence pressed against my chest. I could hear nothing but my own heartbeat. And yet every sound carried through the fog as if multiplied. A soft rustle of cloth, a whisper of movement. I could feel eyes in the mist. Cold, hollow, unblinking. I lowered the rifle. The barrel still radiated warmth. The fog thickened again, swallowing the shape of the weapon, leaving only heat against my palms. I knelt, pressing fingers into the mud. The rifle seemed to pull at the earth, connecting to the past, to voices I could not name. I smelled gunpowder, iron, decay. Every echo carried weight. Boots marching in mud, distant voices shouting commands, the hollow pause of absence. I could not distinguish memory from now. The rifle shivered in my hands. I set it down carefully. The mud clung to it, sticky and cold. The warmth lingered, faint, like breath against skin. I stepped back. The fog twisted between trees and trenches. Every shadow seemed to watch, waiting, folding toward me. I could hear nothing but the faint pulse of my own chest. And yet every sound, footsteps, whispers, silence, pressed like hands against my mind. The battlefield stretched endless, pale and trembling. Rusted helmets glinted faintly. Trenches folded into mist. The rifle lay in the mud, and I could feel its presence in the fog long after I stepped away. I wanted to leave. My hand still tingled from its warmth. My breath tasted of damp soil and iron. The echoes lingered, soft and relentless. I turned. The rifle was still there. Silent, ominous, impossible to forget. I walked on. Each step pressed the cold mud beneath my boots. The fog curled around me, damp, dense, unyielding. Every sound was alive. A whisper of cloth, the tremor of distant metal, the echo of a heartbeat. I felt the weight of what had passed here, what I had held pressing into me. I glanced back once. The rifle lay empty, cold, yet somehow full of presence. The fog shifted, moving over it, hiding it, revealing it, like the earth itself was breathing. I could feel regret pressing in, not for what I had done, but for holding it, for knowing its history, for leaving it behind while its memory stayed. The fog thickened again. I could hear echoes fading, stretching into the night, yet the warmth in the mud lingered. The battlefield hummed softly beneath the fog. I took another step, and the rifle remained, impossible and patient, waiting beneath the mist. Its heat pressed against memory, pressing against the quiet. And I carried unease with me, heavy in my chest, as the fog swallowed my footsteps. The battlefield lay quiet, beneath a pale, trembling moon. Fog draped over mud and broken earth like a damp blanket. Each breath carried the scent of iron and cold soil. A chill brushed my neck. Air still, yet icy against my skin. I shivered, feeling it linger, curling along my spine. Shadows stretched between the hollows and trenches. I felt eyes tracing me, following, patient. They did not move, but I knew they were there. Each step pressed deeper into mud. Cold seeped through my boots. The earth beneath me hummed faintly, pressing history into my bones. I whispered my own name softly. The fog answered, carrying it back to me. A faint echo, distorted, like someone else had spoken it. Leaves rustled without wind. Branches scraped together, brushing my arms. The smell of damp moss and smoke pressed into my nose. I stepped forward. The fog curled around my legs, tugging gently. Each movement felt slower, as if the earth itself was pulling me down. I sensed presence all around me. Figures just beyond vision. Shadows folding, bending, impossible shapes between trees and trenches. A cold gust swept across my face. I could feel breath, not my own, along my neck and ears. The whisper of voices pressed against my skin. My heart quickened. Every heartbeat echoed through the fog, loud and certain. Footsteps pressed softly behind me, though nothing appeared. I stopped. Silence pressed in. Yet even in quiet, the whispers curled through the air, soft, insistent. I turned slowly. Nothing but fog and pale moonlight. Shadows shifted just beyond clarity. A voice called my name, soft, elongated, impossible to place. It came from the fog, from the earth, from nowhere. The chill deepened. My breath rose in misty clouds, mixing with the fog. The smell of wet soil and decay pressed in with each inhale. I stepped forward again. Each motion felt like sinking deeper into something ancient. The earth beneath me hummed faintly, as if remembering. Shadows moved independently of light. Figures flickered at the edge of perception. I could feel their gaze pressing into my back. A sudden rustle, sharp, close. I spun. Nothing. The fog swallowed sound and sight alike. The whispers continued, calling, tugging at my mind. Every step echoed in my chest, amplified, unnatural. I reached out, touching the damp earth. Cold mud clung to my fingers. It seemed to pulse faintly, alive with the weight of history. Breath, not mine, brushed my neck again. Fingers of cold sliding down my spine. Eyes unseen followed every move. I wanted to run. The mud sucked at my boots. The fog pressed closer, damp and heavy. Whispers grew, threading around the trees, through the branches, curling into my ears. They spoke my name over and over, a chorus of impossible presence. I felt the ground beneath me shift subtly, as if the battlefield itself were alive. I stopped, shivering. The whispers faded slightly, leaving silence heavy and tangible. Even silence felt alive, vibrating in my chest. The cold lingered. I could feel it pressing into my skin, tracing every nerve. The fog wrapped tighter around me, damp and unyielding. I walked on slowly, every step pressing through the earth and history. The shadows remained just beyond sight, patient, watching. The whispers returned briefly, soft as breath against my cheek. My name stretched and hollow. The fog curled into my boots, my sleeves, my hair. I paused. The battlefield stretched endlessly, pale, trembling. Shadows twisted, impossible and eternal. I felt isolation pressing in. Dread settled in my chest, slow and heavy. And still, the whispers lingered, soft, calling, certain. The chill pressed deeper. The fog clung to me. I stepped forward into silence, carrying the weight of unseen eyes. Alone. And not alone. The battlefield breathed beneath the fog, and the cold followed me. The mound rose from the battlefield like a small, lonely island. Fog curled around its base, soft and damp. Moonlight trembled through the mist, pale and fractured. Atop the mound, a tattered flag fluttered, its edges frayed, catching the weak light. Each ripple carried the scent of wet canvas and iron. I stepped closer. The mud pressed into my boots, sticky and cold. The fog clung to my legs, curling around my ankles. The flag shifted, not with the wind. It drifted away, just beyond reach, as if aware of my steps. A hum rose from the battlefield, soft chanting, distant and faint. I could feel it vibrating through the fog, brushing my skin, curling into my ears. I moved forward again. Each step pressed deeper into damp earth. The scent of smoke and rust followed me, heavy and lingering. The flag floated further. The fabric twisted impossibly, caught between shadow and moonlight. Its motion seemed alive, deliberate, patient. The chant grew, faint, layered, impossible to locate. It pressed against my chest, a pulse in the fog, a rhythm in the damp air. I paused. The world seemed to hold its breath. Even the fog froze, curling softly around roots and mud. The flag waited atop the mound. It fluttered slowly, edges sharp against the pale light. I felt the earth beneath me shift slightly, like the mound itself remembered. I stepped forward again. Each footfall echoed faintly, amplified through the mist. The chant followed, stretching and bending with the fog. The wind did not move. Yet the flag twisted, floating just beyond reach. The cold pressed into my fingers and face, damp and persistent. I could smell wet soil and iron, sharp and tangy. Every sense heightened. The battlefield felt alive, waiting, patient. I reached the base of the mound. The chant seemed louder now, pressing into my chest, curling around my thoughts. The flag hovered slightly higher, just out of reach, impossibly light. A sudden pause. The chanting stopped. The fog stiffened, pressing against me, silence heavy and certain. The flag hung still. Moonlight struck it perfectly, edges flickering, ghostly. The world felt suspended, frozen in expectation. I blinked. It drifted slightly, teasing motion, yet anchored by some unseen presence. The earth beneath my boots hummed faintly, alive with memory. I could feel the past pressing through the fog. Footsteps, laughter, commands, cries, all layered beneath the mound, beneath the flag. The air smelled of wet canvas, iron, and old smoke. I stepped closer again. Mud clung to my boots, sticky, cold. The chant hummed faintly in memory only, a pulse fading through the silence. The flag remained just beyond reach. It floated, patient, impossible, a reminder of something long forgotten. I could feel my heart thrum, slow and heavy in the still air. The fog curled higher, pressing around my legs. The mound seemed taller, sharper. Shadows bent strangely in the pale moonlight, folding over themselves. I lifted a hand, reaching toward the flag. The wind stayed still. Yet it drifted further, teasing, alive, a ghost in motion. The chant returned softly, almost beneath hearing. A whispering hum threaded through the fog, brushing my cheeks. The flag responded, fluttering slightly, edges trembling in pale light. I stopped. The world held its breath again. The mound waited. The flag floated impossibly, a memory pressed into fabric and shadow. I turned. The fog pressed against me, cold, damp, insistent. The chant faded completely. The mound and flag remained, patient and untouchable. I stepped back into the mud. The battlefield stretched endlessly, pale, trembling. The flag hovered in the moonlight, unreachable, alive in its stillness. A weight pressed in my chest, fear, wonder, both at once. The fog curled at my boots, soft and insistent. I walked on slowly, carrying the image of the forgotten flag, drifting beyond reach, and the echo of chants lingering in the chill night air. The frozen mud cracked underfoot, cold biting through my boots. Fog rolled across the battlefield, thick and damp. Each breath carried the sharp scent of ice, wet earth, and rust. Footprints pressed into the mud. Fresh, yet impossible to place. They led forward deeper into the gray swirl of fog. I followed. Each step pressed heavier than the last. The mud clung to my boots, sticky and unyielding. Shapes flickered at the edges of vision. Shadowed, impossible, vanishing when I turned. They moved in the fog, teasing the corner of perception. A faint whisper traced my ears, soft, elongated, impossible to locate. I stepped carefully, pressing the cold earth with cautious feet. The footprints continued, fading and reappearing. The fog curled higher, coiling around my legs, clinging to my jacket. I heard rustling without wind. Leaves brushing together, faint and deliberate. The air smelled of damp moss, frozen mud, and iron. I blinked. Shapes shimmered and vanished. Impossible trees twisted in the fog, trunks bending unnaturally. The footprints stopped briefly, then reappeared, leading around a mound, folding into nothing. Each step I took pressed the frozen mud, leaving echoes behind. A whisper brushed my cheek. A name stretched thin, almost lost in the fog. I couldn't tell if it was warning or invitation. I moved forward, boots sinking slightly into ice-laden mud. The fog pressed closer, damp and cold. Every sound, the creak of mud, my breath, amplified, echoing. Shapes twisted at the edges again. Shadows folding over themselves. I caught glimpses of impossible movement, dark forms rising, then gone. The footprints led into a hollow. Fog clung like liquid, curling through trees around roots. The path disappeared beneath it, swallowed completely. I paused. Silence pressed in, dense and heavy. The whispers lingered, curling through the fog like smoke. I stepped carefully into the hollow. Mud pressed cold and damp against my soles. The air tasted of ice, iron, and old smoke. Footprints reappeared, faint, leading away from the center of the fog. Impossible angles, twisted paths. I felt drawn forward, curiosity pressing against dread. Shapes moved between trees again, flickering just beyond clarity, bending shadow and fog together. The whispering followed, soft, urging, warning. I leaned closer to the ground, tracing the footprints. Frozen mud cracked under my fingers, brittle and cold. A faint metallic scent rose, sharp, like the edge of memory. I took another step. The fog thickened instantly, curling around my legs, climbing higher. I could feel it pressing, damp and persistent. The whispers grew slightly, layering into voices I could not distinguish. Names, commands, memories pressed against me. Curiosity nudged me forward, unease tugged me back. The footprints curved into a small hollow of trees. Shapes twisted there, impossible to hold in sight. A shadow flickered like a pulse. I followed. The fog clung closer, damp and cold. Every step carried the smell of wet earth and frost. The footprints vanished again. No path remained, only frozen mud pressed underfoot. Shapes folded into the fog, leaving only whispers. I lingered. The whispers were faint, guiding, warning, impossible to place. The air trembled, damp and still, holding its breath. I traced the mud, following nothing, expecting everything. The fog pressed higher, dense and patient. Shapes moved just beyond vision, curling into shadow. I stepped forward into emptiness. The footprints were gone, swallowed by fog. But the whispers lingered, echoing softly, insistent. I felt curiosity pressing into my chest. Unease lingered in every nerve. The battlefield stretched endless, fog-bound and alive. I could not know if I was following or being followed, if the whispers led me forward or warned me away. I moved carefully, boots sinking into frozen mud, fog curling around my legs. Shapes flickered once more, impossible and fleeting. The footprints left no trace. The fog pressed close. I walked on. Curiosity and unease pressed against each other in my chest. The whispers lingered in the mist, guiding me into nothing. The frozen mud cracked beneath my boots. The fog curled higher, and I pressed forward, alone, into shapes, shadows, and whispers I could not reach. The ground beneath me felt alive, cold, damp, trembling beneath each step. Fog wrapped over the battlefield, soft and thick, carrying the scent of wet earth and iron. A low hum pressed through my boots, vibrating, subtle, impossible to ignore. I stopped, listening. The hum pulsed beneath my feet, steady, insistent. The battlefield stretched endlessly, pale in the moonlight. Trenches swallowed shapes. Shadows pressed against each other. Rust clung to the broken earth, sharp, tangy. Voices rose from the soil, soft, layered, calling names I did not know. Each syllable pressed against my chest, curling around my ribs. I knelt slowly, mud cold against my palms, sticky, damp. The hum deepened, resonating into my bones. I pressed my hand to the earth. The soil felt warm beneath my fingers, pulsing faintly like breath. Whispers threaded through it, brushing against skin and ear. The fog shifted. Shapes moved just beyond sight, twisting between shadows and moonlight. Each blink revealed something different, impossible to hold. The hum rose slightly. It pressed through my soles, up my legs, into my chest. I could feel it vibrating beneath me, alive, patient. Voices whispered names again. Not mine. Unknown, foreign, urgent in the quiet night. I leaned closer, touching the mud with both hands. It pressed soft and heavy against my palms, molding around my fingers. The smell of wet earth and iron rose sharply, tangy and real. The battlefield seemed to lean in. Shadows stretched longer, folding into themselves. Every breath tasted of cold soil and faint smoke. I could feel life or memory threading through the ground. Every pulse of the hum pressed history beneath my hands. Names, whispers, murmurs rising from the earth. I knelt in silence. The fog thickened, curling over my arms and shoulders. Cold moisture pressed to my skin, persistent and slow. The hum shifted slightly. It vibrated in rhythm with something beneath the surface, a heartbeat hidden in the soil. Each pulse pressed into my palms, into my chest, into my mind. I heard footsteps above the hum. Soft, tentative, swallowed quickly by the fog. The whispers threaded through it, urging, guiding, warning. I pressed my ear to the ground. The voices rose, layered, fragile, echoing through soil and memory. I could not understand, could not place them, yet they demanded attention. A shadow moved across the mound, shifting, bending, ephemeral. The hum carried its presence, vibrating beneath my knees, beneath the earth. I traced my fingers through mud, cold and damp. The whispers shifted around me, brushing against skin, curling into hair. The soil seemed alive, patient, aware. I breathed slowly. The battlefield stretched silent, fog curling, shadows folding. The earth pulsed faintly beneath my hands, alive with names and memory. I pressed deeper. The hum hummed into resonance with my heartbeat. I could feel wonder and fear pressed together in my chest. The voices softened slightly. A layer of quiet settled over the battlefield, damp and dense. The fog pressed higher, curling over my arms and boots. I remained kneeling, hands pressed to the trembling soil, feeling history beneath my palms. The hum continued, low and steady, echoing through the bones of the earth. Shadows folded once more. Shapes flickered just beyond vision, impossible, patient. The battlefield held its breath. I rose slowly, leaving my hands pressed for a final moment. The earth beneath hummed faintly, memory pressing into quiet. Whispers lingered, fading but certain, threads of presence woven into mud and fog. I stepped back. The battlefield stretched endlessly, pale and trembling beneath moonlight. Wonder and fear pressed into me, heavy and alive. The fog curled around my boots, damp, patient. The whispers echoed faintly through the soil, threads of memory I could not untangle. And I walked on, carrying the weight of voices in the earth, humming softly beneath every step. The ground was soft beneath my boots. Wet earth clung to the soles, heavy and cold. Evening light filtered weakly through the fog, gray and endless. I had been walking for hours. The air was thick, unmoving. Every step felt like pressing deeper into something that did not want me there. That's when I saw it. half buried in the mud. A helmet, rusted, dented, but somehow untouched. The metal caught a pale shimmer from the dying light. Drops of moisture slid across its curve, slow and deliberate. I knelt, my breath misting faintly in front of me. The soil was cool. It resisted when I reached for it, like fingers didn't want to let go. But I lifted it anyway, and the world stopped. Every sound folded into itself. No wind, no rustling, no heartbeat. The silence wasn't empty, it was heavy, thick, as though something was listening from beneath it. The fog pressed closer. It moved like it had purpose, circling, twisting around my knees. I could feel it clinging to my skin, damp and cold. I stared into the hollow of the helmet, dark, unbroken. It smelled faintly of ash and something metallic, something old. I felt a vibration run through the ground, faint at first, then steady, like distant footsteps trying not to be heard. My breath caught in my throat. The silence deepened further, pulling tight against my chest. Even my breathing felt wrong, as if the air didn't want to move. The fog brightened for a second, pale, ghostly light flickering like breath on glass. I blinked and shapes formed within it, shadows standing in lines. Still, patient, I whispered, without sound. No words reached the air. The silence devoured everything before it could live. The ground shifted beneath me, soft mud, pulling slightly at my boots, trembling as if something moved underneath. And then, a touch, cold, weightless, a hand against my shoulder, every muscle locked. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The touch stayed for a moment, gentle, almost human. Then gone. The fog thickened, swallowing everything around me. The world narrowed to the helmet in my hands. Its surface no longer looked rusted. It gleamed faintly, wet and smooth, like something recently cleaned. I wanted to set it down, but my fingers refused. It was warm now, almost pulsing. The silence pressed harder against my ears until it became a hum, so deep it wasn't sound anymore. It lived inside my ribs, trembling through bone and breath. I finally lowered the helmet. Mud swallowed it halfway, sighing softly as it sank. And the hum faded. The air returned in a single rush. Wind through the fog. A crow far away. My breath, sharp and real again, but the warmth on my hands lingered. It sank into my skin, impossible to wash away. I looked down at the helmet. The fog curled protectively around it, drawing close, closing in, almost like it was reclaiming something that had never belonged to me. The world felt off-kilter, too quiet still, too expectant. I backed away slowly, the mud sucking faintly at each step. The fog thinned behind me, but not ahead. The helmet remained, half swallowed by the earth, waiting. A whisper brushed the edge of the silence. Soft, stretched thin, lost in the wind. It could have been a name. Could have been mine. I didn't look back again. I couldn't. But I could feel it still. That touch, that silence, settling into me, slow and cold, and I knew some things are buried not to be found, but to be forgotten. The fog had been there since morning. Thick and silver, it swallowed the hills and blurred the trees until nothing looked alive. I walked the old path anyway. The ground was slick from last night's rain. Puddles clung to the dirt like fragments of sky that had forgotten to fade. The air smelled of iron and moss. Each breath felt colder than the one before. It was quiet enough to hear my own pulse. Then I saw it. A puddle wider than the rest, resting at the curve of the path. Something shimmered across its surface. Letters. Small, trembling words drawn in ripples of water. Handwritten, as if someone had pressed their finger into the puddle from beneath. I knelt. The letters shifted, joining together until I could read them. We waited here. They never came. The water quivered once, then stilled. The words were gone. My breath fogged the air. I felt the weight of something standing behind the mist, watching, listening. I moved forward slowly, boots sinking into the soft ground. Each step seemed to wake another puddle. Each one carried more words. The fog took the first line. The horses screamed for hours. He called my name, but I had no mouth left to answer. The handwriting was uneven, desperate. The letters broke apart when I blinked, melting back into the reflection of gray sky. A stone caught my eye ahead, flat, smooth, damp. A message scrawled across it in something that looked like frost. Remember us. My fingers brushed it. Cold seeped straight through skin and bone. For a second, I saw faces in the fog, blurred, hollow-eyed, mouths open as if mid-prayer. When I blinked, they were gone. But the chill they left stayed, humming through my hands. The wind began to stir, faint but wrong. It didn't move through the trees. It circled around me instead, carrying whispers that never reached full words. More stones followed, some cracked, some half-buried, all marked with writing that seemed to appear only when I looked directly at them. The sentences grew longer, more frantic, like someone trying to finish before they were pulled away. They burned where they stood. The commander fell last, still calling for dawn. We are still waiting for dawn. I couldn't breathe for a moment. The air was too dense, too still. It pressed against my throat until every breath felt borrowed. I turned to leave, but the fog shifted first. It coiled around the path, curling inward, closing me in. And there, just beyond the nearest tree, something moved. Not a person. Not a shape I could name. Just movement. Like the fog itself had remembered how to walk. The puddles began to stir again, words reappearing, one by one, looping and overlapping until they filled the ground like handwriting on a page. Do not leave. We remember your face. Stay. My heart stumbled. I stepped back, nearly slipping in the mud. The water rippled violently, as though dozens of unseen hands had reached up and struck it at once, and then stillness. The fog thinned in one slow breath. The words vanished. The stones went pale again. Only the sound of my breathing remained, unsteady, too loud. I realized then how far I'd walked. The path behind me was gone, swallowed by mist. No direction looked familiar anymore, I called out. The sound fell flat, swallowed whole before it could echo. I was alone. Utterly alone, and yet the air carried that strange warmth again, like the earth itself was exhaling beneath my feet. As if the ground remembered voices I'd never known, as if it whispered their stories through me. The next puddle waited ahead, still, inviting. When I stepped closer, my reflection didn't return. Only more words. You've read too much. Now you will remember for us. The letters drifted apart, carried by a wind that never touched my skin, and I understood. These weren't messages left for someone. They were messages sent through someone. The fog closed tighter. The world turned faint and colorless. And I realized the voices had stopped writing, because they didn't need to anymore. They had found someone new to speak through, me. The air felt heavier that evening. Late autumn. The kind of chill that seeps through layers, quiet and patient. Fog moved low across the field, rolling over the torn earth like breath from a sleeping thing. Everything was gray. The sky, the ground, even the trees in the distance. Only the rusted cannon stood out, broken open, its barrel half swallowed by mud. I stopped when I saw him, a figure beside it. Still, almost part of the mist itself. The shape of a man in uniform, old, worn, edges blurring with the fog. He stood with his back to me, one hand resting on the cracked cannon's rim. The air around him didn't move. For a long time, I thought he might be a statue, a memorial left behind. But the longer I stared, the more certain I became that he was breathing. I could see the faint pull of his shoulders, slow, deliberate. Not alive exactly, but not gone either. The wind had a strange weight here. It hummed softly through the grass, carrying something metallic. The smell of rust. Old blood, maybe. Rain. I took a step closer. Mud pulled at my boots, reluctant, as if the ground wanted to keep me away. The figure didn't turn, didn't shift. Only that same shallow rise and fall of breath. When I reached the edge of the crater, I could see the details clearer. The uniform, tattered, heavy with moisture. Buttons dulled to green-gray. A torn insignia on the sleeve I didn't recognize. His head tilted slightly downward like he was listening. To the soil. To something still moving beneath it. My own breath came out uneven. Every instinct told me not to speak, not to break the silence that seemed older than I was. The fog pressed in tighter, curling around us both. The cannon groaned quietly, metal expanding in the cold. It sounded almost like a sigh. Then he turned, just a fraction. Enough for me to see the hollow curve of his face, skin stretched pale, eyes dark and distant, reflecting nothing, like glass filled with smoke. For a heartbeat, I thought he was looking through me, past me, at something behind my shoulder. I didn't dare move. The air thickened until it felt like standing underwater. My ears rang faintly, a low pulse that seemed to come from the earth. It grew stronger the longer I stood there. And then I blinked. He was gone. The fog hung in his place, swirling slow and aimless. The cannon still leaned the same way, but the space beside it was empty. Completely empty. Only the damp grass showed that anything had been there. A single footprint, pressed deep, still filling with water. I crouched near it, hand trembling. The mud was cold, colder than it should have been, colder than the air. When I touched the edge of the print, a faint vibration ran through the ground, soft, almost like a heartbeat. It stopped when I pulled my hand away. The field around me felt alert, listening. I whispered into the mist without meaning to. "Who were you waiting for?" No answer. Just the creak of the cannon cooling, the slow drip of water from its mouth, and that deep, heavy silence that seemed to stretch forever. The fog shifted again, brushing against my arm like the edge of a sleeve. I froze. For a moment, I felt warmth. A faint touch, fingers resting lightly against my coat. Like someone making sure I was still there, then nothing. Only the soft rustle of grass bowing to the wind. I backed away slowly. The ground seemed to breathe beneath each step, as if something ancient stirred just below the surface, watching me go. At the crest of the hill, I looked back one last time. The cannon stood alone again. No figure, no movement, but the fog had gathered thicker around it, shaped almost like a man waiting beside it once more. I watched until the outline dissolved into white, until the horizon disappeared and there was nothing left to see but gray. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that he hadn't vanished. Just paused, still waiting, still standing guard over a battle long forgotten, and beneath my boots, faint but steady, the ground kept humming, low, endless, as if somewhere deep below, he was still there, listening for the next war to begin. The night was still, too still. Even the wind seemed afraid to breathe across the field. Only the fog moved, slow and deliberate, curling through the broken grass. I walked carefully, boots pressing into soft earth. The ground was heavy with moisture, dark, almost black. Each step felt deeper than it should have been, like the earth was hollow underneath. Moonlight caught the edges of puddles, silver pools between mounds of mud and stone. For a moment I thought they were eyes, and then they were small, round shapes half buried in the soil. Not stones, skulls, dozens, maybe more. Their hollow sockets caught the pale light, each one staring in a different direction. As I moved, the reflections shifted, following. Empty eyes glinting from beneath the ground. A faint whisper stirred, so soft it felt imagined at first, like breath moving through cracks in the earth, but it grew. Not words, just pressure. A shape in the air that trembled against my skin. The smell was sharp, metallic, thick with decay and wet grass. It filled my lungs until I felt like I was breathing the past itself. I knelt beside one of them. Its jaw was cracked, moss blooming where teeth once were. Mud filled the spaces between. Yet the skull seemed awake. Something about it was wrong. The reflection in its hollow eyes didn't match the sky. There was no moon inside them. Only movement, shadows, and flickers of pale faces behind me. I turned, but there was only fog. The whisper came again, closer now. It wasn't one voice. It was many, layered, straining. My name wasn't among them, but it felt like it could be. Every syllable pulled at my chest, like invisible fingers curling around my ribs. I tried to step back, but the earth held me. Mud sucked at my boots, swallowing them inch by inch. The ground pulsed faintly beneath my feet, alive, breathing. Each skull seemed to rise with it, slowly pushing upward, like something underneath was lifting them closer to the surface. Their empty eyes shimmered. A dim glow filled the sockets, cold and white. As if catching light from beneath the soil instead of above it, the whisper turned to a hum, deep, vibrating. It rattled my teeth. I felt it through my legs, my spine, my skull. Every nerve sang with a quiet panic that couldn't escape my throat. The fog thickened until I could barely see my own hands. Shapes moved within it. Silhouettes crouched low, faces tilted toward the ground, as though searching for something they had lost. I called out once. It came out small, swallowed instantly by the air. No echo, only the hum, and the soft rustle of mud shifting behind me. When I looked down again, the skulls had moved, closer, half above the surface now, as if climbing. Their hollow eyes no longer caught light. They made it. A faint glow burned from within, cold as frost. I could feel my heartbeat in my palms as I reached toward one. The light dimmed when my shadow crossed it. And then, quietly, the whisper stopped. Everything fell still. The hum faded into silence. Even the wind refused to return. It was worse that way. When the world forgot to make a sound, my breathing felt too loud, my pulse too alive, and under it all, the faintest vibration, like the last tremor of something deep underground. I tried to move again. My boots tore free from the mud with a sick, wet gasp. The fog opened slightly, just enough to see the field one last time. The skulls were gone. Only the prints of where they had been remained. Perfect hollows in the mud, filled with water, each one reflecting the moon. But in the reflection, I saw not the sky. I saw faces staring up from beneath it, eyes without light, mouths half open like they were waiting for air. And in that moment, the ground beneath me exhaled, a long, cold breath that brushed against my ankles. A breath that did not belong to me. I stepped back again. The earth sighed. The fog closed around my legs. I kept walking, even though I couldn't tell if I was moving at all. Every direction looked the same. White, endless, soundless. But I knew what waited behind me. Still buried, still watching. The hollow eyes of war, waiting for the next voice to join their silence. The fog lay thick over the field. It clung to the ground, unmoving, like it had been there forever. Morning light tried to push through it, pale, thin, and cold. But the mist only swallowed it whole. I walked slowly. Each step sank into the damp earth, soft with old mud and broken grass. Everything smelled of rust and rain. Quiet, except for the faint drip of water from the trees. That's when I saw it, hanging from a splintered branch, a bugle. Its brass was dulled, eaten away by time. One side was crushed, bent inward as if something heavy had fallen over it. Yet it still hung there, caught in the wood like it had been waiting. I reached out. The metal was cold, slick with mist. My reflection wavered across it, blurred, warped. Almost like a face beneath the surface was watching me back. When I lifted it from the tree, the fog stirred. A ripple moved through the air, soft but alive. It brushed against my arms like breath. I hesitated. The silence grew heavier around me. Not peaceful, expectant. The world seemed to hold itself still, waiting. I don't know why I did it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe something older whispering through the air. I raised the bugle to my lips. The taste of metal was sharp, bitter, cold enough to sting. My breath trembled as I blew. A single note escaped, low, uneven. It drifted through the fog like a ghost that had forgotten its shape, and then it echoed back, far across the field. The same note, the same breath, but not mine. I froze. The echo didn't fade. It grew stronger, like someone had answered. Another note followed. Higher this time, fainter, and then another behind it. A chorus of ghostly brass bleeding through the fog. The ground beneath me seemed to pulse. The air trembled full of invisible breath. And in the haze ahead, shapes began to form, faint outlines. Figures standing shoulder to shoulder, their forms flickering like candlelight. They weren't close enough to see clearly, but I felt them. Hundreds of them, their silence pressed against my chest. Waiting for me to play again, my hand shook. The bugle trembled in my grasp. I could hear a heartbeat, mine or theirs, I couldn't tell. I lifted it once more. This time the note came out clean, long, steady. The fog rippled outward in waves. The echoes returned immediately. From every direction, a sea of invisible players answering from the mist. Each one perfect, each one alive. It felt like standing in the center of a memory, a sound trapped between worlds, and beneath the music, I heard something else. Boots, marching, rhythmic, distant at first, then closer. The ground quivered with every step. Wet soil shifted underfoot. I backed away slowly, the bugle still in hand. Through the fog, faint glimmers caught the light. Helmets, maybe. Buttons, bayonets, half swallowed by the mist. I could almost see their faces, but not enough to name them, not enough to know if they were ever real. The march grew louder, then stopped all at once, as if commanded. The fog stilled again, heavy and unmoving. I waited for another note, another step. Nothing, only silence, the kind that hums in your ears, the kind that feels wrong. I lowered the bugle. Its surface was warmer now, like it had been played 1,000 times before I touched it. I looked around the field. The shapes were gone. The fog was empty once more, but the echo lingered, soft and far away. A single note carried by the mist, circling back again and again. I knew I should drop it, leave it where it belonged, but my fingers wouldn't let go. The fog pressed closer, whispering through the trees, through the broken earth. A quiet call I couldn't ignore, and deep beneath it all, I thought I heard a voice, steady, low, almost human. Calling the next command, the air shivered. The silence thickened. I turned to walk away, but the bugle gave one final tremor in my hand. A note escaped on its own, soft, sorrowful. And far across the field, the soldiers answered again. The fog was heavier tonight. It pressed against my coat, against my breath. Each exhale vanished before it reached the air. The forest was still, too still. I carried the lantern low, its glow trembling over wet leaves. The light felt small, like it was afraid, too. Branches dripped around me. The ground pulsed with the quiet hum of insects I couldn't see. Somewhere behind me, water moved. Slow, deliberate. I turned once. Nothing. Just the same curtain of pale mist swaying between the trees. Then, a flicker. It darted past the edge of my light, fast, too fast to name. I froze. The lantern wavered in my hand, spilling light in shaky circles. Every drop of fog caught the glow and threw it back at me, like the forest was full of tiny eyes. I waited, listening. Only the quiet drip of condensation, the faint creak of old wood. Still, I knew I wasn't alone. My heart thudded so softly I could hear it against the lantern glass. I took one step forward, then another. The ground felt alive beneath my boots, roots twisting under the surface like veins. I followed where the shadow had gone, between the trees, through a narrow cut in the earth where mist collected like smoke. My hand brushed the bark, slick, cold, almost breathing. Every sound seemed to pull away as I moved deeper. The forest didn't want me there, but I kept walking. The air grew thicker, heavier. Each breath felt slower than the last. And then, the flicker again, closer this time, just beyond the light. It moved like it was waiting for me to see it. I lifted the lantern higher. Its glow rippled through the fog, painting the ground in gold and gray. There, something shifted. A shape leaned between two trees. Not solid, not smoke either. It looked almost human. Bent. Still. I couldn't see its face, only the curve of a head, a shoulder that trembled like it was remembering how to move. My throat tightened. I whispered, though I don't know why. "Who's there?" The fog swallowed my words before they reached it. Nothing answered, but it was closer now. I felt it more than I saw it. The air tingled, a faint static brushing against my skin. I took a step back. My heel slipped in the mud. The lantern swung wildly, spilling light across the trees. The shape vanished. Only roots, twisted and gnarled, rising from the ground like ribs. They curled toward the light, dripping with mist, dripping with something darker. I wanted to believe that's all it was, shadows and fog. But when I turned, it was there again, right behind the edge of the glow. Standing still, watching. Its outline was wrong. Shoulders too narrow, arms too long. Its head tilted in a slow, jerking motion, as if it was trying to understand me. The light trembled across its shape. But no matter how bright I held it, the center of that shadow never showed a face. Only emptiness. I could hear something now. A faint hum in the air, like breath caught between worlds. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. The fog had thickened around my ankles, pulling me down with every heartbeat. The shadow didn't move. It only leaned forward, enough to touch the edge of my light. The moment it did, the lantern flickered once, twice, and then dimmed. The glow pulsed weakly, like it was struggling to stay alive. In that fading light, I saw the shape tilt its head again, slow, curious. I felt it watching, not with eyes, but with something older, something that remembered me. The lantern stuttered once more. A breath brushed my cheek, cold, dry, so close I could feel the air bend. Then the flame steadied. The shadow was gone. The forest silent again. Only the fog moved, curling where it had stood, like it was still holding the memory of a body. I stayed there for a long time, listening to the silence, feeling it listen back. Somewhere behind the trees, something shifted once more. Soft, patient, waiting for the light to fade. I didn't turn. I just kept walking. The lantern low, the fog closing in behind me, and every few steps, in the corner of my sight, something moved. Just enough to remind me I wasn't truly alone. The fog had settled deep into the valley. It lay heavy on the broken earth, curling around fragments of stone and metal. The air was still, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It felt held. I walked between the remains of cannons, their barrels blackened and split. Each one pointed nowhere now, into the mist, into nothing. The ground was soft under my boots, wet with dew and something older. Rust had eaten through the wheels, the bolts. The words once carved into the steel. I brushed my fingers against one of them, cold. Too cold for the air around it. The metal pulsed faintly beneath my hand like it was remembering warmth. I told myself it was just the wind, but there was no wind. The fog hung motionless, refusing to stir. I crouched beside the cannon. Its mouth was packed with dirt and grass, but inside it was darker, darker than shadow should be. My hand hovered there over the edge of the barrel. A faint hum rolled through the air, low, steady, like breath caught beneath the ground. I touched it again. The metal trembled. Once, then again. Slowly, like a heartbeat waking up. The vibration spread through my palm, up my arm, settling into my chest. It wasn't shaking from the outside. It was breathing. I pulled my hand away, but the motion didn't stop. The cannon shuddered in place, dust sliding from its side. A deep pressure grew beneath my feet. The earth tightened, swelling with something that wanted to rise. I stepped back. The ground exhaled. For a moment, I thought I heard a voice, distant, lost in the soil. Then, the faintest echo rolled through the fog, a boom. Not loud, not sharp, but deep enough to touch the ribs. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. The cannon hadn't fired in decades, and yet the air rippled. A hollow vibration spread through the valley, fading, returning, like memory replaying itself. I knelt and pressed my hand to the ground. The soil moved, not shaking, breathing. Each inhale brought the faint metallic tang of gunpowder. Each exhale, the cold scent of iron and smoke. The fog shifted, thin tendrils curling over the cannon's frame. They twisted upward, spiraling toward a shape that wasn't there. A shiver crawled up my back. Every instinct told me to leave, but I stayed, watching, listening. The tremor grew stronger, as if the field itself was waking. Old echoes stirred beneath the dirt. Muffled footsteps, the faint clang of steel. Then came another boom. farther away this time. Then another, each one fading before the next began. I could feel them, not in the air, but through my bones. The cannons lay still, yet each one hummed faintly. Like a choir of machines whispering to the earth, the ground beneath me pulsed again, steady, rhythmic, almost human. I stepped back until I reached the ridge. From there I could see the whole line, row after row of silent metal, each one faintly quivering, breathing together. The fog carried their exhalations, twisting them into long, pale trails. They moved like ghosts trying to speak. I wanted to turn away, but something in the stillness held me there. A quiet understanding, a wordless mourning. The echo of explosions still lingered, buried deep in the ground. Not sound, not memory, something heavier. The soil beneath me trembled one last time, a slow, aching breath that faded into silence. And then, nothing. The cannons were still again. The hum was gone. Only fog moved now, curling around the metal like fingers closing a wound. I stood there until the light began to dim, afraid to move, afraid the earth would breathe again. But it didn't. Only my heartbeat remained. And somewhere below, something that had once lived, listening still. The fog had returned. Thicker than before. Heavy, like it carried weight. The air was damp, cold enough to sting the lungs when I breathed. I could taste metal in it, old smoke, ash. The field stretched ahead, but the world ended just a few steps away, swallowed by the white. I walked slowly, boots sinking into soft earth. Every step left a print that filled with water, then vanished beneath drifting mist. There was no wind, no sound, only my breathing, shallow, uneven. Then a sound reached me, faint, distant, rhythmic. Footfalls, marching, not close enough to see, but close enough to feel. A soft tremor ran beneath the ground, a pulse that wasn't mine. I froze. The steps kept going, measured, precise, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, moving somewhere inside the fog. I turned slowly, trying to trace the direction. The sound shifted with me, never clearer, never closer. Shapes flickered in the white haze, long shadows thin and upright. They formed for a heartbeat, then melted back into the mist. My chest tightened. I whispered into the fog. No answer. The silence after my voice felt alive, thick, watching. Then the marching stopped. The quiet that followed was worse. The fog seemed to lean in, pressing against my face, my ears, my ribs. It hummed faintly, like something breathing through the air itself. I took a step back. The sound returned. One single footfall, then another, marching again, but slower this time, closer. I strained to see, eyes stinging from the cold. The shapes came again. Taller this time, more solid. I thought I saw uniforms, dark, soaked in mist. Helmets without shine, the rhythm built until it surrounded me. Every direction, every distance, marching in circles I couldn't see. The ground beneath me vibrated. Tiny ripples spread across the puddles. My heartbeat tried to match the rhythm, but couldn't keep up. I whispered again. Who's there? The steps stopped mid-beat. Everything froze. The silence was total. So deep it hurt. Even the fog held still. I could feel it then. The pressure of unseen eyes. Not above, not around, below. Something under the soil, listening, waiting. A soft scrape broke the stillness. One step, then another. Behind me I turned, nothing. Just pale fog, folding into itself. But there, just beyond reach, a darker patch moved. Slowly. It looked almost human. Almost. Its shape flickered like smoke, each edge dissolving before I could focus. I took a step toward it. It mirrored me. My breath hitched. I stepped back. It didn't move. Then it tilted, as if studying me. A soft echo rippled through the fog. Not a voice. Not a word. Just a sound too human to be wind. The shadow straightened, its edges hardening. I could see where its eyes should have been. Empty. Still. For a moment, the world stopped breathing. Then the marching began again. Everywhere. The ground shook. The fog churned. The air turned thick with static and memory. Figures moved through the haze, hundreds, maybe more, marching toward nothing, fading before they reached me. Their rhythm grew louder until I couldn't tell if it came from outside or within me. The fog pressed close enough to touch. It brushed my arms, my face, cold and damp like fingers dragging across skin. I tried to step forward. My legs felt heavy, each motion slower than the last. The air pulsed around me, a single heartbeat stretching across the field. The shapes began to fade again, one by one their footsteps softening, then vanishing altogether. Silence fell like snow. Only the fog remained, thick, still, endless. I was alone again. Or maybe I was the only one still breathing. The silence held me there, wrapped around my body, pressing from every side. It felt like waiting, like something listening for me to move. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because somewhere deep in the white, the marching still lingered, too faint to hear, but not gone. Just waiting to begin again. And I knew, when it did, I'd be the one out of step. The fog hadn't lifted for days. It clung to the ground, to the branches, to the air itself. Even the light from my lantern felt weak, swallowed before it could reach the trees. I stood where the earth dipped into the valley, where the ground was still scarred with trenches and rust. The silence there was different. Not peace, just absence. Then it began, a note, soft, distant, a trumpet. It drifted through the fog like a thread of gold through smoke. Long, haunting, lonely. I froze. It wasn't near, but it wasn't far either. It carried across the field as though the air itself remembered it. The sound curled around me, low, trembling, alive. I looked for movement, anything. But the field stayed still. The grass leaned one way, then another, without wind. The fog moved like breath against the ground. Another note followed. Then another. Each one slower, sadder. It didn't echo. It repeated. Like an answer, coming from somewhere deeper in the mist. My heart began to race, but I didn't move. The fog shifted again, rolling toward me as if drawn by the sound. It brushed against my knees, cold and damp, curling up around my coat. The trumpet's cry deepened, rising into the air until it seemed to fill everything. The trees, the soil, even the bones of the land. Then, silence. A single drop of water fell from a branch above. I could hear it hit the mud. That's how quiet it was. I whispered into the fog. "Who's there?" Nothing answered. Not even the echo of my voice. But then the note came again. Sharper this time, cutting through the mist like a blade of light. The fog responded. It churned, swirled, moved in patterns that felt deliberate. I took a step back. The earth squelched beneath my boots, wet, cold, alive. The trumpet continued, each note trembling longer than the last. And somewhere between those notes I thought I heard something else. Whispers, not words, not voices. Just fragments of air caught between the sound and the silence. The fog grew heavier. It wrapped around me like cloth, thick enough to taste. Metal, smoke, blood. I could barely see my hand in front of me. The trumpet went quiet again, but the air didn't still. It hummed faintly like the earth was holding its breath. Then, one last note. Long, drawn. It carried through the mist, fading until I couldn't tell where it ended. And when it stopped, something shifted. The ground trembled lightly beneath me. A rhythm, footsteps maybe, marching in time with the last vibration of that final note. I strained my eyes, trying to pierce the wall of white. Shapes formed and vanished. Tall, thin silhouettes, dozens of them. They weren't moving toward me, just standing, waiting. Their outlines shimmered as if they were made of the same fog that hid them. For a heartbeat, everything aligned. The mist cleared just enough to reveal a single figure. A man, maybe, standing where the field met the horizon. The trumpet was raised to his lips. His posture rigid, unnatural, unmoving. I blinked. He was gone. Only fog remained, rolling and restless, whispering against itself. But the sound hadn't truly stopped. It lingered. In the soil, in my chest, in the space between heartbeats, the air still trembled with the echo of the call. Soft, hollow, endless. I turned to leave, but the fog didn't let me. It pulled close again, tighter, until I could barely breathe, and from somewhere far off, the trumpet played once more, a single broken note that bent and cracked as if it had come from beneath the ground. Then, nothing. Only the slow hiss of mist settling back into silence. I stood there for a long time, listening to the absence of it, wondering if the battlefield was ever truly empty, or if the music was still playing, just too far away for the living to hear. The fog was thinner that morning, enough to see the shape of the ground again, the uneven ridges, the patches of frost clinging to broken roots. I moved slowly. My boots pressed into wet soil that gave way with a soft sigh. The air tasted like iron and smoke, old smoke, all around me. The field lay quiet, but not empty. Scraps of fabric caught the weak light. Faded blue, torn by time, half swallowed by mud. I crouched beside one. A button still clung to the cloth. A crest, barely visible under rust. I brushed it with my thumb. The metal was cold, but not dead. It hummed, a faint vibration, so low it felt like breath under my skin. I pulled my hand back, but the hum lingered. A few feet away, a metal lay half buried. Its ribbon stiff, its edges eaten away. I touched it. The same hum. The same quiet pulse, as if something was still inside it. Waiting. The fog drifted lower again, swirling around my knees, curling into the small hollows of the ground. I could see the outline of a rifle snapped clean in two. The barrel bent, the wood split. It shouldn't have made a sound. But when I leaned closer, I heard it, a faint ringing. Metal remembering its last strike. Each piece on the field seemed to carry a whisper of something once alive, a ripple of energy moving through the dirt. The air around me trembled, barely, but enough to feel. I looked up, and for a moment the fog almost took shape, like figures shifting at the edge of vision. A shoulder, a helmet, then gone. I wasn't alone. My breath came slow, clouding the air in front of me. Every exhale vanished into the mist, as if the fog wanted to take it from me. Something brushed the back of my neck, soft, cool, like a strand of mist curling with intent. I turned quickly. Nothing. Only fragments glinting dully in the pale light. I forced myself to keep walking. Each step stirred the ground, and beneath it, the hum grew stronger. Not just one. Now, dozens. Layers of faint vibration rising from the earth, metals, rifles, canteens, uniforms. Torn open and swallowed by soil, every object carried a fragment of the same restless pulse. Like the field was breathing beneath me, I stopped beside a helmet. Its rim dented, its inside dark with soil. Something in me hesitated, but I reached for it anyway. The moment my fingers brushed the edge, a sharp warmth spread up my arm. Not pain, just memory, images. Not clear ones, only flashes. A shout, a fall, a hand reaching for something that never came. Then silence again. I let go. My hand shook. The air around me felt heavier, thicker, with a quiet I didn't trust. From deep in the fog, I sensed it. Eyes. Tracing me. Unseen, but close enough to touch. Every step I took forward felt watched, measured. I tried to steady my breath, to tell myself it was just wind, just shapes of fog, but the hum shifted when I moved. Following, the artifacts seemed to wake one by one, their faint vibrations connecting, blending into something deeper, a low, steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of the earth. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't. Something in the field held me still. Maybe it was the way the light caught the fragments, or how the silence between the hums felt. Aware, I knelt again, hand hovering over a torn badge. For a second, I thought I saw a reflection in its surface, not my own. A face, half shadow, half light, watching. The hum deepened. The ground trembled softly, and all at once the air filled with a faint static, like breath trapped in the mist. I stood. The fog closed around me again, dimming the world until only shapes remained. Somewhere behind me, a clink, metal against metal. Then another. And another, as if the relics themselves were shifting in the dirt, stirring after too long a silence. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The hum still followed, low and steady beneath my ribs, like I had taken a piece of it with me. By the time the fog began to thin, the light had changed. Everything around me looked pale, washed of color, like a memory left out in the rain. And for the first time, I wondered if those fragments had ever truly been abandoned, or if they were still waiting, not for peace, but for someone to remember them. The air behind me shifted once more. A quiet exhale through the fog. I didn't turn. I already knew what regret sounded like. The air tonight feels heavy. The kind that holds its breath before a storm. Fog sits low across the field, thick enough to swallow my legs as I walk. It's colder here, colder than it should be. The ground remembers footsteps, soft, rhythmic impressions that seem to echo beneath the soil. I follow them without meaning to. Drawn the way a whisper draws breath, a faint rhythm drifts through the mist, slow, measured, like boots pressing into wet earth. At first I think it's a trick. The wind moving through hollow trees. But then, the rhythm steadies left, right, right. Each step falls in perfect unison, each one closer than the last. The fog begins to move. It rolls and coils, opening small windows of pale light. Through one of them, a figure. No face. Just a uniform that sways with motion. Then another. And another. A silent formation, emerging like memories replaying themselves. Their boots never falter. Each footfall lands with the same quiet precision. Like the ground itself has learned their pace. I stand still, my breath hidden in the cold. And they march around me in circles. Endless, deliberate circles. Their faces are pale blurs. Eyes hollow, but turned toward me all the same. They do not blink. They do not breathe, and yet I can feel them seeing me. Their gaze presses into my chest, steady as their march. Each step vibrates beneath my ribs, a pulse not my own. I whisper, "Stop." But they don't. The fog thickens around their path, a wall of white enclosing the ring. I can't tell where they begin or end anymore. Only the rhythm remains. Left, right, it pulls at me. Not violently, just enough to keep me listening. Just enough to make me want to follow. The ground feels softer beneath my feet. Every step I take forward melts into theirs. Their circle widens. And I realize they're making room for me. The realization sinks slow, cold, steady. I could turn back. I should, but the thought doesn't hold. The rhythm drowns it out. Left, right. My own heartbeat tries to match it. At first it resists. Then it yields. I step forward, one boot after the other. The fog swallows me whole. Shapes move beside me now, shoulders brushing mine, arms swaying in time. Their silence hums like static inside my head. Not empty, just full of what was left unsaid. I keep walking. The air thick with the scent of rust and rain. It clings to my skin, to the back of my throat. Every motion feels remembered, as if I've done this before. Marched here once, fallen here once. I glance sideways. One of them turns with me, his face almost formed, a blur of bone and mist. But his eyes, they're nothing, hollow, reflective, endless. And somehow I understand, this is all they know. This circle, this rhythm, this silence that never ends. The fog pulses with each synchronized step, and I feel it inside me. That same pull, that same emptiness, something deep inside whispers, "You can rest here too." For a moment, I almost do. I almost let go of the thought of leaving. The air feels softer, safer in its quiet repetition. But then, the circle tightens again. And I see their boots never leave the same marks. The ground beneath them shifts, breathing in their rhythm, feeding it. That's when I understand. It isn't them keeping the pace. It's the field, the soil beneath our feet pulling us into its heartbeat. I stop walking. The rhythm continues without me. Their heads turn in unison. Every hollow face tilts toward mine. The silence between their steps grows wide. Wide enough for fear to crawl in. My chest tightens. Every instinct tells me to run, but running feels wrong, like breaking something sacred, so I stay. Still, breathing shallow, their gaze softens if such emptiness can soften. The fog folds over them again, one by one until I'm left alone. Only the echo remains. A phantom rhythm fading into the soil, left, right, left, right. I stand there long after it ends. The air still humming with what was. I can't tell if the silence that follows belongs to the field or to me. And though the fog clears just enough to see where I came from, I don't move. Because part of me knows if I listen long enough. The march will start again, and next time, I won't resist it. The night feels older than it should. The fog moves slow, thick enough to hide the edges of everything. I can't see the sky anymore. Only the faint shimmer of moisture hanging between breaths. The air smells like rust and ash, like rain that never came. And then, a light, small, flickering, swinging gently through the mist. It moves toward me. Steady as if someone carries it, but there are no footsteps. No sound at all. The lantern drifts closer. Its flame wavers inside a cracked glass frame, casting long, thin lines of gold through the fog. For a moment, I think it's just light. Just another trick of this field. But then the shape forms behind it. A soldier, kneeling, still as stone beneath the glow. His uniform is torn, buttons dull with corrosion. The fabric shines faintly, wet with dew or something older. His head is bowed, lips moving slow as if speaking to the earth itself. No words reach me, only the rhythm of his breath, uneven, fragile. The lantern sways again, casting his shadow across the fog. It stretches longer than it should, long enough to touch my boots. I whisper without thinking. "Who are you?" He doesn't answer, but his mouth keeps moving. And when the lantern flickers, I see the faint shimmer of tears sliding down his colorless cheeks. I take one step forward. The ground dips under my weight, soft, as if the soil remembers pain. The soldier lifts his head. His eyes, they're empty, like glass filled with smoke. He looks at me, through me, and the whispering stops. For a long, trembling moment, we just stay like that. Two shapes in the fog, each waiting for the other to vanish first. Then the flame inside the lantern bends sideways, as if caught by a breath that isn't mine. The mist begins to stir. It thickens behind him. Forms, shapes, one after another. Outlines of helmets, of shoulders, of hollow faces half swallowed by light. Dozens at first, then hundreds, all silent, all still. Their eyes reflect the same faint glow, tiny pinpoints of light floating in the fog. I step back. My chest tightens. Every instinct tells me to run, but there's nowhere to go. The fog stretches in every direction, flat and endless. The soldier lowers his head again. The lantern dips with him, as if bowing to something unseen, and I realize they're not moving toward me. They're waiting, watching, listening. The silence grows thick enough to hum. It fills my ears, my lungs. Each breath feels borrowed. The light trembles once more. The soldier's lips part, and I hear it at last, a single word. Barely a breath. "Stay, my knees go weak." The word feels wrong, like it didn't belong to this world. The fog folds around him, curling inward, swallowing his shape. Only the lantern remains. Floating. Drifting slowly away from me, the way it came. Its glow grows smaller, a fading ember in the white, and as it goes, the others begin to fade too. Their hollow eyes dim one by one until there is only stillness. Only me. The field stretches out again. The mist thins, revealing dark soil and shattered metal buried deep. Pieces of lives once held in human hands. A buckle, a medal, a dented flask still glinting faintly in the weak light. I kneel without thinking. My fingers touch the cold ground where the soldier had been. It's warm. The kind of warmth that feels like memory. Like something not gone, just waiting. I look up. The fog moves slower now. calmer, almost peaceful, and somewhere in the distance I see the last glimmer of that lantern before it disappears completely. The world feels heavier without it, but quieter too. Maybe that's what he wanted. Maybe that's what they all wanted, to rest. To be seen once, then fade. The silence presses in again. It feels endless, familiar. I stay there until I can't tell if the fog has lifted or if I've simply become part of it. The dawn came slow, like it was afraid to touch this place. The fog clung low to the ground, pale and heavy, weaving through the bones of the old field. Grass grew in crooked patches, slick with dew, and every step left a dark mark that filled with water. It was quiet, too quiet. Only the soft rustle of wind through bent metal and the faint hiss of mist sliding across the earth. The battlefield stretched farther than sight. No edges, no end, just silence and the memory of what used to move here. Sometimes, when the wind shifted, it almost sounded like voices, like someone breathing just behind me. I didn't turn. I knew better now. There were things in the fog that only existed if you looked too long. The pale light crept higher, revealing fragments half buried in mud. A bayonet, a button, a handprint hardened into the soil. Each one glimmered faintly, as if holding on to something that refused to fade. I could feel it too. That hum beneath the ground, low, steady, a pulse that wasn't mine. I started walking, trying to shake it off. But with every step, the air seemed to follow, thick, pressing, almost aware. The horizon stayed still, like I hadn't moved at all. I whispered into the fog. "I'm leaving." The words broke apart, swallowed before they went anywhere. And then, faintly, I heard it. A reply that wasn't a voice, but an echo. Not from the air, from the ground. It rose through the soil in a slow vibration, a rhythm too careful to be chance. One beat, then another, like boots marching, somewhere far, then near. Then everywhere at once, the fog trembled. Shadows began to shift within it, long and fragile, figures, dozens, moving in slow circles, their outlines flickering in and out of the mist. I couldn't see their faces, just the dark emptiness where eyes should be, and the faint shimmer of uniforms still loyal to time that forgot them. They passed by me without sound. Without breath, each step pressed deeper into the mud, leaving prints that filled and vanished. I stood there, watching the rhythm of them, feeling my own heartbeat begin to match theirs. For a moment it felt peaceful, like the air itself exhaled. Then one of them paused, head turning, slow, deliberate. The others froze. The world stilled so completely that even the fog seemed to stop moving. I couldn't see his face, but I felt his gaze. It passed through me, a coldness that wasn't cruel, just endless. And then, as if remembering something, he bowed his head. The others followed, every one of them lowering together until the field was filled with silent devotion. The hum deepened. The earth shivered under my boots. I stepped back, and the motion broke whatever held them. They began to fade, each one dissolving like smoke into the dawn, one by one, until only the footprints remained. Then even those began to fill with light. I took a breath. The first full one in what felt like hours. The fog was thinning now. The field stretched open, quiet and wide beneath a pale sky. It almost looked normal again, but as I turned to leave, I heard it. Soft, distant, barely there. The echo of marching. The rhythm I'd tried to forget, following me, not as a threat, but as a memory that refused to stay buried. The sound lingered until I reached the road. Then it faded, melting into the whisper of the wind. I looked back once. The fog had already closed over the field, empty, still, but I knew it wasn't. Some places don't end when the fighting does. They just wait, holding on to what they've lost. And if you listen closely enough, they hold on to you too. The air tasted of iron and silence. My hands trembled, though the cold had long since left. I walked until the ground changed, until grass gave way to gravel and gravel to stone. But the echo The echo stayed, quiet now, almost gentle. A reminder that I had walked through their resting place, and they had walked with me,